I wanted to go natural.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, perfect. So, as a church, we've heard a lot about your...
So have we started?
Oh, are we starting?
Oh, yeah, we started.
Oh, we're starting. You got this. How did you decide to start a business?
Okay, well, I got into business unexpectedly. So I never had in mind to start a business. Although over the coming years, after we were first married, I think I started about 5 businesses. So it just shows you might not actually think you're the business person, but I sort of walked into it. And I think it was something that God led me into. So what happened was I left Bible college, trained there for 3 years, came back, and we bought our first house. We had our first baby, and then as we were, involved in church life, I had to have a regular job. In fact, I worked for my father, who was a businessman, and he'd started a couple of companies over the years that I'd worked for in a part-time way. So I was working for him for the first 2 years when we came back to Hereford after college. And then they had a big move in their life where they left the UK and they moved to Northern Ireland. And so he met with me and he said, Gary said, I'm selling up everything. I'm going to make you redundant. So I was made redundant probably, I think it was 2 years after I was married. We were about to plant church, and I was thinking, great, I'm about to go out here and, step of faith, plant church. We had our little house in a town called Leominster, and I was then made redundant, which at first it shook me because I was reliant upon that full-time job. And my dad wasn't really looking at perhaps setting me up or helping me or encouraging me in business. He was off, and it was down to you. Now, at the time, it shook me, but it was probably the best thing that could have happened, because I then started thinking, okay, well, if I'd been running one of his businesses, managing a bit of a garden business, and I thought, well, if I've done this for my dad, I could do it for myself. And I was 22 years old, and I was thinking, okay, maybe rather than just go and find another job, what about starting my own business? So I spoke to my dad, and I arranged getting a bank loan and buying some of his stock that he was closing down, and then I took over the lease on the business and took on this business. And that's how I sort of got into business, and from there started building the business up and learning all the lessons of business by myself, because my dad had gone, and that ended up to be quite an incredible journey.
What is the advice you'd give someone who's just starting a business?
You've got to get good advice when you set up business. There were some things I did when I set up business and I could have done with speaking to people. And that's why I love this whole, this kingdom business idea of getting people together, learning from one another, because I didn't have people around me that I could ask the questions. And people who have gone before you, who know what it is to set up limited companies, partnerships, etc., I wish I'd had more information on those things, because how you set up often is the foundation of how you build the business. And because I didn't get good advice at the beginning, it cost me later on as things grew, because you often think, well, this business is small, but if the business grows and it becomes a big turnover, how you set it up, you can pay a big price for. So I think having counsel, advice from those that have done things, be a learner, be a question asker. I think that's something I would have done far more. Get around people also that are, Christians who are successful in business, and learn from them. Ask for time for them. Ask to go for a coffee with them and learn from them, because we're very enthusiastic when we start off. We have great ideas, and we think our idea is the best idea. But you need to go and ask, look, what can I do better? What can I learn from? What are the things I need to put in place? That would be a real key thing.
Of all the businesses that you've started, what was the hardest and why?
Okay, so I started the first business, and it was in garden buildings, sheds, glass houses, those things. And we weren't creating enough turnover to quite pay for all the overheads. So I thought I've got to start a second business. So the second business I started was a pet shop. And it was called, I called it Dr. Doolittle's. And it was like, right, we're going to sell pets, but these weren't just ordinary pets. These were exotic animals. So I had like parrots, spiders, snakes. In fact, I think the craziest animal I've ever sold was called Kevin, who was a giant fruit bat. And he was the most remarkable creature. Anyway, so I had a zebra painted car, marketing. You know, I was all out. It was like, we're going to market this thing. And we were very well known, but that was our second business we started, ran it for 2 years. But it also became the toughest and the hardest one, because looking after animals, and animals die. And when they die, you lose the money that you invested in them. So it was like, it was actually a time that so much time was spent in it and so little profit. And so after 2 years, I closed that. But again, I think in business, you want to always get the right idea. The first idea is going to be your best idea. It doesn't always work like that. Many people who've become successful have actually tried several things before. And there's something about trying. You've got to limit I think the risk that's involved, that you can recover and then go again. Because after the pet shop, I tried a third business. So you've got to be able to recover, you've got to test it, you've got to gauge it through your profit and loss and through your time and what you want to see returned. But you've got to almost be prepared that you've got to kill that idea. Don't just run with it and let it soak everything in. Sometimes you've got to strategically quit something to be able to walk into the successful thing that comes next.
How do you know when it's time to step away from a business?
I think all of us need a passion for what we're doing. So if you're the entrepreneur or the business owner, the moment you lose passion about what you're doing, you've got to really question why you're doing it. Because if you're not passionate about it and it's just something you're doing, I think you're in a bit of danger. And there can be different reasons for losing passion over it. So you've got to that's always a great gauge, is how healthy am I in this business? If I still got passion, because from passion you get vision. From vision, you sort of push through problems, challenges, you drive things forward. It makes you different from the competition. So that's really important. And obviously the classic things, which are always managing your finances, always managing your profit and loss, your budgets. For some of us, we're great creators in business. So we love doing the creative element of turning out the product or meeting the people and providing a service for people, but we're not that interested in the finances. And that's a big mistake. Even if you've got someone who manages it for you, you've got to know exactly what you have, what your debts are, what's coming in, your cash flow. And this is where some great ideas go wrong, where people just don't allow for the difficult time. They don't allow for the challenges or debts that haven't been paid, and it can crash a great idea. So the reason I quit, I started 5 businesses, and I quit 3 of those. And they were down to some of the difficulties and challenges, some of the passion that I lost through doing it, but also, more importantly, it was the return, the profit. It was like, if I'm not seeing a profit and this is costing me, we'll often go through business when you establish things, you might think, right, it's gonna be 2 years before I make a profit. But once you get through and past that point, you get an idea of thinking all the work and the hours I'm putting into this, and I'm not seeing the profit, returned in the way I want. It's like, is this really worth it? And you've got to then make a decision to think, right, I've got to cut my losses now. And that takes a lot of bravery, because sometimes we'll run things for years and it is like, it's taking something from us. It's like hard work. We're running it on the edge of things. And sometimes we've got to be brave and look at all that, know where we are, set some goals. And if you don't reach those goals, you've got to start asking some big questions. Is this something that's going to work?
How did you manage starting a business and starting a church at the same time?
When I started in business, we were also starting church. So we planted church 30 odd years ago. And it was quite risky because I had to pioneer a business as well as pioneer church. And then we had our second born baby at the same time, and we moved house the same week. And obviously people tell you shouldn't do all of those things. But what I've learned in business, one of the things we've got to manage well is how you manage pressure. And if you can't manage the pressure, you're not going to be able to manage business. It's like, if too many things go wrong and things happen and you start sort of handling that badly, and it affects your home life and it affects the way you are with people and it affects your sleep, you got to question whether you're doing the right thing. So not everyone is made for business. So I think if you can handle pressure, handle it well and make good decisions under pressure. And I think that's what it taught me, was really having, a second young baby. We're trying to build church. We're starting this business that we don't really know what we're doing within it. That was a great test of growing my character through those early years. And when I started the business as well, it was really to release us, because I knew that God's call for me was for building church. And in a way, if the church could have afforded to pay me a wage, like some friends I had, perhaps I would have just become a pastor and I would have just done it the easy route, which was like go and be employed by a church. But I felt God saying, no, I want you to pioneer. And pioneering is very similar to starting business. It's entrepreneurial. You have to go in and you have to start from nothing. You have to speculate. You have to have an element of faith, of thinking, yeah, I've got something that works. I've got something worth selling, something worth people's attention. So I think from there, I learned so much about church through business, but I never had a heart to run business. I had a heart to run church, but I felt like God gave me the opportunity and like almost a long-term vision. And it was like, if you really want to, grow people, impact people, see the church grow, you're going to need to be outside of a 9-to-5 job. You're going to need to be your own boss, because the church is going to require more than just you. Well, I'm busy 9 till 5. And so that was another motivation for me, was, okay, well, what if I started my own business? I could take care of my family. I could release some time once I established things. I could employ people, which meant then it would free up my time. And so this was like an avenue for me to go down, so that long term, in the years to come, I could even use the business and its resources to resource the church. And that's always been my motivation. It wasn't I've got this great business idea and I want to be successful and I don't know, I want that nice car or whatever. It wasn't around that. It was around the fact that I felt I wanted to make a difference to other people's lives. How was I going to release my time? By building business. Then what it does, you see, when you're a business owner and when you build a successful business, it actually gives you opportunity. So that's one of the massive wins. It's not so much about, well, you've got more money and you've got more, it's opportunity. If you have more opportunity, you can say yes to things that you could never say yes to if you were in a normal, regular job and you've only got a certain time off through the year. And so it was opportunity. And through that opportunity, it obviously enabled us to build church in those early years.
Why do you think there are so many entrepreneurs in the freedom movement?
I think there's probably two parts to this. The first part is freedom. The way I see that we've, the DNA of our church, expressive passion and I think the way personal ownership and all these, the DNA of who we are as a church, I think we're risk takers. That's so much to do with faith. And if you're going to be a business owner, you've got to confront some fears. What if this goes wrong? What if this doesn't work? Many people don't start out in business because they're so fearful of it going wrong, but they'll never ever discover their potential. And it might be your first two businesses might not go as planned, but you will learn so much through it. But the third one might be one that really begins to go. So there's something about the opportunity, about I think taking the risk, that there's potential in every one of us. And I think in freedom we have that culture is there's potential in you, and we see people come in who grow in confidence and self-belief and say, do you know what, maybe I could do that thing. And so I see this all the time, because we have so much vision within Freedom that we can make a difference, we can change the world. We see someone come in who is timid, and maybe in this world where they were trapped by fear, get free from that. They suddenly start thinking, well, maybe I could start my own business. Maybe I have what it takes to create this opportunity and be successful in this area, which will then allow me to impact more people. And the other part of it is, I know that some of our guys are so motivated to find a way of income in quite unusual circumstances. So I got so much honor for our church planters who will get up, leave sometimes successful jobs, go to parts of the world where they're not allowed to work. They can't go and get a regular job, or they're challenged with really surviving through that year of church planting. And I think my heart is to really see guys not struggle, but to almost prepare. And that's why I love getting the business owners together, business entrepreneurial thinking people together, because God doesn't want us to struggle in that. We don't always have to struggle and eat rice for a year. I think there is so much potential in every one of us, and it's the way we think. It's like the way we think about ideas. It's thinking about how we can overcome problems. It's being problem solvers. It's thinking of, right, I've got this product and that's the way, I'm going to market it this way. And I think there's so much within us as believers that we have such an advantage in this world to build great business. But God wants to take hold of that and use it so that it can release us to go anywhere in the world. And that's not for everyone, but I've spoken to many people who they know God's calling them. In the future, it's like, hey, I don't know where God's going to call me, but I'm just like preparing, and I need to prepare financially. And I said, you do. You can have a great dream, but you need a great plan. And part of having a great plan is having that training, the preparation. And if you can build in the early days and understand and learn about business, it can set you up to go here, there, or wherever. It's opportunity. So when I think of business, Christians in business, it gives you so much opportunity to allow God to use you to influence others.
How has your relationship with God impacted the way that you do business?
I couldn't have imagined doing business without a relationship with Jesus, because I really didn't have that self-belief. I was at this crossroads really when I was made redundant, of thinking, do I just go mainstream and just go and find another job and just sit in that and do as I'm told? And it was at that point that I felt God say, no, there's more in you. And I think it was the vision and the calling for my life that God had that said, no, you need to actually start this business. You need to begin to step out and take a risk. And the thing is, you can't do this without the risk. And I think when you understand the walk of faith as a believer, you understand it's a risk. You put your faith in what you cannot see. You're sure of, those things that aren't that evident. And from it, there's so much in us that we can transfer, not just being a Christian for our Sunday, but being a Christian every day of our life. And that comes through business. And so I see so many similarities of the entrepreneur, right, and building church, around faith, expectation, goals, discipline, risk-taking. It's like, what comes through your hands. It's not just about what comes into you, it's what comes through you. All those things are great principles that have set me up. What I'd also just add is we did hit tough times. And there was a particular point where someone owed us a huge amount of money and they went bankrupt. And it had a massive impact on us that we almost lost our house, we almost lost everything we owned. At that point, I had a factory and I employed people, and I had to come to an arrangement where I had to close the factory, finish my employees, some were family, so that was like really a tough time, just to survive, to come through. And this was because of a debt from someone who went bankrupt. So I felt, why did that happen to me? Why? How come that? That God allowed that to happen. He said, no, I'm training you through this. I'm training you through. And I could have given up at that point, but it was my faith that really gave me hope and a promise that there was more. And I had to trust God that through prayer and through encouraging myself, that's like, okay, I might have to sell everything off and start. I'd started from the beginning again with £1,000 and started all over again. And from that point, built up the business into almost £1 million business within like 4 months. So 4 years, 4 years and 4 months, that'd be amazing. In 4 years, we got that turnover back, but it's going back to the basics. And it was my faith for absolute sure, knowing that God had a bigger plan over my life, that my success wasn't just down to me. I think part of that gave me a gratitude. So I think every Christian business person, you need gratitude. When you have your tough days, when things don't go right, when you have a customer that's difficult, you got to have gratitude. Gratitude is a winner. And you got to have that you've got this opportunity. And this opportunity is to produce the potential that God's placed in you. But it comes through risk and it comes through hard work.
In your mind, what makes up a kingdom business?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, but this is what I get asked quite often from people in business who are Christians, is trying to almost work out, hey, well, I'm doing this business and this is my ministry, is my business. And when I come to church, that's my church, ministry part. And I would say that if you're a believer, everything's kingdom. Everything is kingdom. You don't come to church on a Sunday and almost like separate your business from what you do on a Sunday. That's not the way I see. Kingdom is whatever God's placed in our hands. It really is to do with stewardship. And I think stewardship, God is massively interested in what he puts in our hands and what we do with it. And if we really understand kingdom, you got to understand that whatever gifting he's put in your hands, you see, if he's given you a gift to make money, you got to understand that it comes for the kingdom first. So all the businesses that I ran, we were blessed through that, but one of the things that we always did was we tithed through the tough time, the hard time. And when we made £100 a week, we tithed on that. But if you don't tithe at the beginning and wait to become successful, you'll find it hard to tithe on £50,000. And so we set it in as a principle that this business is kingdom business, and it is to fuel and serve the bigger picture of this mission, on earth that we have. So we committed to that we would always tithe, and we'd always use whatever resource we had over and above our tithe, we would use our business for. So we were still blessed through it. I don't think there's anything wrong with like having nice things, going nice places, being blessed through the fruit of your labor, but it is to do with stewardship. What God puts in your hands, he expects you to multiply. So for me, that is kingdom, and it's 7 days a week. And so if I'm out in business, meeting customers, that's kingdom. I might have the opportunity to share my faith. It might be just by the way I handle a difficult situation, and I show understanding in that and honesty to my employees. It's like, that's kingdom. It's how you can't separate them. I see so many people like, oh, well, that's my business and this is my Christian life. No, they bleed into each other. They're part of the same thing. And if all of us realize that when I'm doing business, this is kingdom, and when I'm doing church, this is kingdom, it's all of the same. And what I'm doing within my business, I want it to resource and serve the kingdom, and that's the church. And so it's like it's such a privilege to be able to do it, but it's around stewardship. And many people don't understand that God hasn't just called us to be faithful, but he's called us to be fruitful. And that's a real priority, that he wants us to be fruitful in all that we do, and whatever that looks like, that we do it for him.
Any final thoughts you want to share with our freedom businessmen and women?
You are the key person in the business, and you can employ people with great skills and they can do other things for you, but you're the visionary. You're the one that needs to lead in this. And you get some people that have a really good idea, but don't really see themselves as the one who is like leading. Like you got to discover what good leadership is, and that's why I see good successful people are self-learners, they're self-leaders. And you need to, even in the fact in Freedom we do so much I think teaching and input about like leadership and self-development and evaluating yourself. All of that you can apply into business, because it's about being a great leader, a leader of yourself, a leader of your discipline. And how successful you are is always determined by the discipline of your diary. And I think that it's not just like random, let's do this week or that. Discipline and hard work, you can't escape it. You can't very few people get rich easy. You get it through mistakes. So you've got to handle mistakes and failure. And it's evaluating those things. And if you keep making the same mistakes, you can have 3 businesses and they'll keep failing. You've got to learn from them. So although I had 5 businesses, 2 were successful, all the mistakes I learned and the failures from the other 3 I put into the 2. And it's like taking hold of that, but I had to evaluate and stop things that I practiced that I liked to do sometimes but weren't profitable. And I had to do the things that I didn't like always doing that were best for me. And it's like around discipline. It's around that motivation of, I'm going to like train myself, teach myself, discipline myself. And don't complain about what you're doing. Again, be grateful for this opportunity. If you're the one who complains the most about having to go into the office or do that stuff, you're not going to see success. It needs to come out of a heart of gratitude. And I think even around the thing of wealth, I would just say you've got to be very wise. If God is going to bless you and you see growth and you see success, amazing how when you have a lot of money in your hands, if the priorities of your heart are not good, it will actually ruin you. And I think in the early days, if I'd have seen more blessing and success, I think it could have corrupted me more. But God almost like used some of the harder lessons to say, always make me a priority. And maybe I can finish on this. This is all about priority. It's about like, your business, your great idea. It's like my call is to be a business person, and I can give to the church. It's like, and I think you've always got to realize that you're part of the kingdom of God first. Business is always like secondary, and that might be your gifting and calling, but don't sort of almost exclude yourself from other things because you're saying, well, I'm just here to make money and give to the kingdom. God wants to do far more in you than you could ever imagine. And I think some people exclude themselves. Always put his church, the local church, it says that's God's first priority. And you got to be involved in that at all cost. Don't let your business almost like take you away because, well, I've got to run this, but I am a good giver. It's like you need to be involved relationally, connecting with people, serving, loving, no matter the status you are within your business. Priority is key. Keep the priority of the love for the local church, and how you give and serve into that is like a secondary thing. Be a part of that. Don't be separate from it, because God is looking for so many people right now who he wants to put finance and wealth in their hands. But he said, you've got to have the right order of priority first. My kingdom comes first. Everything else will come next.